Hi everyone, it's John Heath again here for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on Animal Farm key quotes. Okay, so it's a twisted tale of propaganda and corruption on this one. So we've got three of the best themes, and we've broke them down for some really good quotes, which you can then drop into your essays, into your exams, and all those kinds of great things. So it'll really help you all. So first off then, without further ado, let's dive in. So we're going to look, the first theme is probably the most powerful one, which is corruption and power. Okay, so let's have a look at three really good quotes for that. Okay, so first up, you can see the pig there, loving life. Okay, let's have a look. Now the first power and corruption quote is, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." That's one of the commandments of animalism from chapter 10. Now, what that does is it really symbolizes the ultimate hypocrisy of the pigs. Okay, the pigs kind of took over the revolution when the animals took over the farm, and they are using language now to manipulate political narratives, if we're being posh about it, to justify the inequality in the system and the dictatorship of the pigs. So they took over the farm to allegedly be equal, as it says, but they're using it to justify, but, you know, the pigs are kind of like ruling the roost, so some are more equal than others, which is obviously nonsensical. Okay, so it kind of reveals the rank political hypocrisy of the pigs, but also remember, because this text is an allegory, it's actually firing criticism towards Joseph Stalin's Russia, who the kind of pigs represent in some ways. Okay, next one. We've got lovely Shire horse there. We've got Boxer, the Shire horse, who works really, really hard, and he says, doesn't he, Napoleon is always right. Okay, he's just swallowed the propaganda. Napoleon obviously being the leader pig on the farm, an allegory of Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader. And Boxer has just swallowed the propaganda. So it shows how political messages and narratives are constantly given to these kind of animals, and it inspires blind loyalty. And with the loyalty, the leaders just get even more corrupt. Okay, so they just kind of take the message as, yep, everybody agrees with me, so everybody thinks I'm right, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Okay, and that leads to political ruin on the farm, and in Soviet Russia it led to political ruin, as we know, from Joseph Stalin's kind of crazy policies. Okay, and then on to the next one. Again, the piggy's back. Let's have a look then. The pigs did not actually work, but directed and supervised the others. That's from the narration, who is pretty much George Orwell, in chapter 3. And that highlights the early signs of inequality and the rise of a privileged ruling class. So the pigs kind of helped launch the revolution, but then they quickly distanced themselves from all the hard work to make the farm actually kind of operational. And it shows, doesn't it, that again there's corruption there. They're not willing to put a shift in. Okay, and it's again an allegory of Joseph Stalin, because Joseph Stalin and his cronies in the Soviet Union, they launched a revolution, but then they lived in dachas and the Kremlin and beautiful places, whilst the Russian peasants, like the animals on the farm, toiled away and lived very, very miserable lives. It's very good for context there if you want to do some extra research in that area. Okay, on to the next theme. We have a very linked theme. We have propaganda. So let's look at three of the best here for this. Okay, so we have one from the sheep, who don't get loads of airtime in the novella, but they do get a bit. And the sheep bleat constantly, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which is like a political slogan on the farm, implying that 2 legs is obviously humans, so they're bad, and anything that walks on 4 legs, animals, are good. So it represents kind of political slogans just endlessly kind of thrown into the mix ad nauseum to kind of persuade people to agree. So a slogan used to suppress independent thought, and it represents the simplification of the ideology of animalism in the novella to control the masses. If you can make your message simple enough for anybody to understand, then you have a much better chance at indoctrinating or brainwashing the population. Okay, and that slogan couldn't be any simpler, really. You could probably get a 3 or 4-year-old to understand that. So it's kind of showing that propaganda has to go to what we call the lowest common denominator, a message which everybody can understand. Okay, next one. We have Squealer. And Squealer's the kind of propagandist, isn't he, on the farm? And he says, do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. And Jones was the horrible farmer who used to abuse them on the farm and who got overthrown by the revolution. So Squealer kind of shows in all political propaganda there is an element of fear-mongering when you make people scared, basically. And you use that fear then to justify the pig's control and manipulation. If you can scare people politically, then they are much more likely to do what you say, aren't they? Because they're scared that if they don't follow the message, then bad things will happen to them politically. Okay, so it shows if I was writing that in an essay, it shows the inextricable linking of propaganda and narratives of fear to control the population. Okay, and the next one, Squealer comes back. Again, from the narration in chapter 2, a great quote. Squealer could turn black into white. Now, what that means is basically how propaganda, and the propagandist Squealer, is used to twist the truth and rewrite history. So if Squealer said that, the sky is purple, the animals just nod their head and go, okay, it's purple. So it's the power of propaganda to actually twist reality and get people to believe lies. Okay. And if you say enough, the sky is purple, for instance, people start to believe it. So it just keeps getting hammered into the animals' heads until they can't kind of entertain independent thought anymore. Okay, very, very powerful propaganda method there. Okay, and then last but not least, let's look at some inequality quotes. Okay, so quotes for the theme of inequality. Okay, and we have Old Major, Loving Life, at the start of the novella there in chapter 1. And he says at the start, this is before the revolution, when they're all toiling on the farm and the animals are being treated like dirt. The life of an animal is misery and slavery. Look at the tone, look at the lexical choices, misery and slavery, very powerful. Old Major is obviously an allegory or an allegorical figure for Vladimir Lenin, and he, in Soviet Russia, he was the one who led the way for the communists to take control. Okay, so it sets the tone of oppression. It highlights why the revolution was necessary. They were getting treated like absolute slaves on the farm, and the animals wanted a better life, and who doesn't want a better life? So they overthrew Jones and took over at the start of the novella. Okay, next one. Back to Boxer again, repeated. Boxer is an allegorical figure in my mind for the Soviet working class, those who worked really hard for the revolution but still never improved their position. And all the time Boxer says, I will work harder, as if Boxer works hard enough they'll reach this communist utopia, but they never will, because it's all a lie. Okay, and that makes it very tragic. So Boxer there in that quote reflects the exploited working class's dedication and their naivety, because you're never getting to a communist utopia. You're just going to die after working yourself to death. It's pretty grim stuff. So the working classes or Boxer's suffering enables the pigs to rise on the farm, because they rise on the back of the hard work of animals like Boxer. Okay, so it's the ultimate hypocrisy of communism. It promises you the earth if you work hard enough, but we'll never reach that utopia and you'll just die a horrible death. It's a pretty grim message. I might be over-egging it there slightly, but that's ultimately Orwell's quite negative message towards Soviet and Stalinist Russia, especially because he kind of hated the way the Soviet Union was being run by Stalin. Okay, and then last but not least, from the narration again, let's look at this final quote. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, but already it was impossible to say which was which. That's the final line of the novella. So what it means is, yeah, the pigs helped the revolution and started it, but they've become inseparable from humans. We can't even tell anymore. So the ruling pigs have become indistinguishable from the oppressive humans that they replaced. So they've become just as bad as Farmer Jones, who used to enslave the animals at the start. So therefore, the final message has to be the revolution, which was there to liberate animals, has failed. And I think that's George Orwell's main political point about the animals, but also obviously about Joseph Stalin's Russia. It's failed. They've promised the working class a utopia, a beautiful world, and they are not delivering it. And in Soviet Russia, they were killing a lot of Soviet kind of people, throwing them into the gulags and things like that, the prison camps in Siberia. And the revolution was ultimately a massive, massive failure. Okay, so there you go. So what we've done then is we've sliced and diced 3 really good themes for your essays and for the exams, as always, and we've given you some good analysis on some really good quotes to learn for your essays and exams. It just remains to say, as always, everyone, thanks for watching. We really, really appreciate it. Please do hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon, and we promise you'll never miss another Let's Learn video again, and we're always kind of uploading. And yeah, and it just remains to say thanks for listening and take care.